Welcome to Elite Broker, the podcast showcasing the leading players and stories of success from Australia's broking industry.
Hello and welcome back to Elite Broker. I'm your host for today, Annie Kane. And in this week's episode, we're speaking to one of the recent winners of the Better Business Awards 2026. Now, if you were in Queensland for the BBAs in Brisbane, then you might know that Kit Johnson from Aussie Forest Lake was named as the Editor's Choice winner for Queensland this year. And in this episode of the Elite Broker podcast, I brought him onto the podcast to talk about what he's been doing and amplify his story a little bit more. Now, most brokers spend their days analyzing credit policies and LVRs, and today's guest obviously does that too. But did you know he spent the previous 2 decades analyzing things a little bit more classified, shall we say? Before he was securing homes in Doolandella and Ellen Grove, Kit Johnson was an intelligence analyst. He traded the need-to-know secrets of the clandestine world, or at least that's what I'm thinking, for the need-to-know details of the mortgage world. And it turns out skill sets aren't that different. They both require an obsession with fine print and the ability to stay cool when the stakes are high. Kit nowadays is the co-owner of Kit nowadays is the co-owner of Aussie Forest Lake alongside Danny Blair. And despite only being in the industry for 4 years, he's already operating at an elite level. Just last month, as I say, he took home the Editor's Choice Award. And really that was in recognition for his technical expertise coupled with compassion and clarity. Over 27 years of high-level analytical experience, he's been looking at all things detail analytics, spreadsheets, but also doing it all with a bit of a sense of humor. And his client reviews and his reputation among colleagues as well have turned them into raving fans. So much so that he sometimes sent photos of his successful clients performing celebratory shoeys on settlement day. So in this episode of Elite Broker, we're declassifying the journey of a man who moved from intelligence to interest rates and finding out how he's built his broking career. Welcome, Kit, to the show, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we mentioned there that you went from intelligence analyst to broking. Now, this to me, I've just finished watching Jack Ryan, so I feel like that is basically what you were doing before. What exactly does an intelligence analyst do?
Look, I wish it was that exciting, but the intelligence analyst was more in front of a computer. That was sort of my day-to-day, role here in Australia was just unpicking things from an investigative point of view, providing clarity on what investigators should be looking for and what they shouldn't be looking for. A lot of financial crime investigating. I think in Australia it was very much an organised crime focused.
Yeah.
It was an interesting work, but probably nowhere near as exciting as what you believe at the moment.
I'm going to pretend it's basically Jack Ryan. I'm making you the Jack Ryan of Queensland.
Okay, right. I'll run with that.
But it's not like a traditional move, is it? Going from intelligent analyst to broker. So walk me through your journey. How did you actually get to become a broker?
Look, it was I guess it definitely wasn't the normal sort of brokering origin story, I would guess. I mean, most of the brokers, I've watched other podcasts, and they've all sort of come up through the finance world. And no, mine was very, very different. Grew up on a cattle station in sort of Southern Downs in Queensland. After I guess sort of got to the age where I could leave home and did the backpacking thing. Met my wife, now wife, while I was doing that, and we ended up settling in the UK in a bit of neutral territory. Obviously, her being Irish and me being Australian, so it seemed like a good idea at the time. Intended to be there for 6 months, and before I knew it, it was 15 years later.
Yeah, wow. And then moved back to Australia. How long ago?
2015. We came back. We built a house here. I guess over there, I sort of did similar work over there, but probably at a sort of a more, management level. Had a lot of, I guess, insight into, what the sort of geopolitical situation at the time was. ISIS was sort of running around everywhere, and, terrorism was a pretty real threat over there. So just sort of made the decision that it was probably better to, raise the kids in Australia. So we sort of planned our escape and packed up over a sort of a period of about 12 months. And back we came.
Back you came. So you went back and settled in Queensland. And then how long was it before you were like, you know what, I'm going to kind of become a broker? Like, had you ever used a broker before? Did you know anything about broking?
No. I'd been involved in a lot of property investment, I guess, in the UK, a lot of, flipping, had that sort of, I guess, awareness of mortgage products, because I'd done it, so many times myself. And I think to some degree, it was sort of like a little mini retirement plan when I came back to Australia. It was sort of, got out of the work that I was doing, just try and decompress a bit, and came back and had probably 12 months off. Before I knew it, I was, back into government, doing it again. And then at that point, sort of realised that I needed a change, and it's just something that occurred to me in the research, looking for something to do. Local Aussie franchise, had a couple of meetings with the guys that ran that, and before you know it, was sat at a desk.
Yeah. And obviously Danny Blair is the sort of the first principal of Aussie Forest Lake. He's principal of many franchises, I think, actually, up in Queensland and more broadly. So did you kind of reach out to him? Did you answer an advert? Like, how did you find?
I think it was probably back in those days. I think it was more sort of just going through the Aussie franchise, or I guess recruitment process. In that you would make contact with the Aussie, sort of home loans recruitment guys, and then depending on where you lived and where you wanted to operate, and what channel you wanted to go into, obviously, as well. But I think I just got put in touch with Danny and John, who were the joint franchisees there at Ipswich, and it just made a decision on sort of gut feeling more than anything. Obviously was familiar with the brand, but other than that, it was probably more down to convenience. It being nice and local.
Yeah. Did you ever did you ever talk to any other aggregators, or consider any other groups going independent, for example?
Look, I probably did, but I think again, it really came down to me in terms of convenience. It was a 10-15 minute drive to that particular office. The reputation was good. There was really nothing, telling me not to do it. And I think, with the line of work I've always been in, it's sort of, you make a pretty quick assessment on something and, just move forward with it.
Yeah. So you were kind of interrogating them to be like, do I want to join you guys? And then
that's the way I looked at it. I was interviewing them rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they would feel the same way.
So you decided to join them. What was it about broking specifically, as an industry, that you thought this would be a good career for you? It sounds like you kind of just didn't really necessarily want to be doing what you were doing before in the high stakes world of intelligence analytics, but what is it that kind of attracted you about broking?
I think it was, in that previous life, it was, there was always a tangible outcome. There was always something that, was an end result or an aim of it. And I think broking is very, very similar in that sort of context. It's, it's analyzing, it's investigating, it's coming up with a solution, and then, doing everything possible to get there. So I guess when you sort of take a big helicopter view of it all, it's a very similar, process, problem in place. So, yeah.
So when you actually came to starting your broking career, obviously you have to do all the qualifications and certifications and accreditations. Did you was there anything in that process when you were learning how to become a broker and getting all the things in place that surprised you?
Look, I think the surprises probably from that came after the fact. I think I sort of got into, just cracked in and did the certificates and things, did the training. And then I think there was a bit of a sort of a shock once you get into the industry and how different the industry is in reality in comparison to the training. It's probably like any industry, I guess, once you're on the tools, it's a different, different scenario.
Yeah, I think the sort of frequent anecdote that we get, the comparison, is being it's like training to be a doctor, and you can read about heart surgery, but it's not until you actually do it that you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I think I always sort of try and explain that to new brokers as they're coming through. It's, just you've got to do the work. You've got to put in the hard yards there in the training. But, in reality, the real training starts once you get that, that piece of paper, and then, you learn how it's really done.
So nowadays, what kind of loans are you writing? Are you doing everything? Are you just doing resi? Do you do kind of, a bit of commercial, or do you do asset?
Look, commercial space, I guess, for me is probably more with existing resi customers that might have some sort of requirement for that. So we don't do a whole lot of them. We do them, but not our bread and butter. I think when you've got a sort of a fixed storefront in a shopping centre, we're very much a community store. So we're just dealing with whatever the community wants, which obviously in a massive residential area like Forest Lake is tends to be just your residential refinances, your purchases, your mums and dads who are looking to, enter the investment world. We're not like a lot of brokerages that would really focus on their sort of high net worth investors. Ours are more the customers that we're sourcing from the community and being visible there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is, I think, one of the benefits about franchise brokerages like Aussie, for example, that have storefronts is that you're in high traffic areas, high footfall areas. So people will walk past and maybe see the sign outside being like, oh, great, I need to refinance my loan.
Yeah, look, obviously rent is a killer in those sort of like locations, but ultimately I think we get somewhere between 3 and 4 million people walk past the front door, every year. So, just the visibility. And I guess I always try to rationalize that as, my rent, a large portion of my rent really is my advertising budget, with the signs up out the front. And, just taking, it's not unusual for us to get 4 or 5 in a day, just wander into the shop and, make some sort of inquiry, which, is great.
Well, typically when I have people on this podcast, I always ask them if they can remember what their first deal was. And I'm assuming it was someone who probably walked in. But was it? Or was it like a client or friend or family?
Do you know what? Actually, so the first deal would have been at Ipswich. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire, really. I sort of came on board and it was around the time of the, sort of a big lot of Ipswich floods. Ipswich is an area that floods quite badly regularly, and this couple that were lovely couple, late 50s, early 60s, refinance, cash out for some renovations and some outdoor kitchens, that type of thing, and this is why it sort of sticks in my mind so much is that I think it was about the day before they were due to settle this, very straightforward refinance. The lender, which I won't name, dropped an embargo on the entire postcode, and these guys, of course, had lots of work done and needed to pay tradies, and anyway, so it was the next 2 months of hell trying to get the lender to. I think we had 3 valuations done. I think we had hydrologist reports. They were kilometers away from the nearest, flooding or water, but trying to convince the lender that this was the case was, near impossible. I think it took about 2 months to settle it. So it was definitely a memorable one. So I won't forget that one in a hurry.
Yeah, but I bet now that you're really well up on your hydrology reports.
Well, if it's a good, I think to be honest, it probably. Probably endeared me to the industry. I think the challenge of that, and again, historically, that's the sort of challenging, not straightforward. You've got to overcome a lot of adversity to get to the end result. And I think I probably just gelled with it because that was the first deal, and enjoyed it to some degree. I probably wasn't saying that at the time, but the customers definitely weren't. But they were really appreciative of all the because they could see it definitely wasn't from our side of things. But I guess lenders' policies aren't always logical. So yeah.
And this is the beauty of broking, isn't it? Is that you're able to find solutions for people when they think there might not be any other option, or they might not know where to look or how to talk to the lenders about what they're doing. So well done you for getting that loan settled. So nowadays, are you mostly focused then on the kind of the refinances? Is that what you're seeing mostly come through your doors as first home buyers?
Look, the last couple of years, I would have said, had been predominantly purchases. Just the last couple of weeks, probably just noticed a bit of a shift in that. I think with all the things going on in the world and, rates and, all of a sudden, I think the people that were considering investments or, upgrading or, whatever it may be, are now reconsidering their options and thinking, do you know what, let's just sit tight, let's lock it in for a couple of years and, ride out the, the turmoil in the world. And, and I think probably when I started, that was sort of coming out the back end of COVID, and that's what it was like at that time as well. So it's just, it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it? I think we'll probably get back to the point that it's called purchases again, but it feels to me like we've probably got a couple of years worth of refis being now the sort of predominant business that we'll have.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to me. I mean, like, obviously on The Advisor, we're writing about what's happening in the industry day in, day out and constantly talking to people. And I think, with the increases in the rates, but also in inflation, and as you say, the sort of geopolitical environment, like not sure what's going on. It's a lot of uncertainty like there was in COVID. And I think now it's really so many people reaching out to brokers to being like, what do I do here? Do I fix? Do I not fix? Do I hold on my strategy for a while longer? If I'm a small business owner, how do I navigate this? Because my costs are going up. So much support and advice, credit advice needed at the moment. So a great time for being a broker, I think. But hopefully, we'll see some business come through that way as well. You mentioned about, the storefront kind of being your main advert. Do you do any like kind of lead generation work in terms of advertising or marketing?
Oh, look, I think there's two really distinct types of brokers in my mind, and I think there's those that are sort of like the really overt, get involved in the referral partners, their BNIs and the groups and things like that. And then there's probably the old school, which I probably put myself in this category, is it's really just leveraging the customers that you've got. 70% of my business, more would come from just customer referrals. Obviously, it takes a while, like a couple of years to get to that point. Obviously, we've got brokers in the store that we do obviously marketing and local community engagement, that type of thing to keep those brokers with plenty of work. But from a personal perspective, I've always just focused on give the customer a great service. They go home and tell friends and family, and before you know it, you've written loan for 4 brothers in a family, and and start writing for the cousins, and then that's the way I guess I've operated since I've been in the industry anyway. But I think it's just different horses for courses. Some brokers prefer a little bit more of an immediate impact, and I think they go down that route of the the groups and the referral partners and things. But I've got a few, do work with a few real estate agents, but yeah, majority referrals.
And you talked about, sort of the different brokers in the franchise there. So how many people are in Aussie Forest Lake?
At the moment, I think we've got 4 full-timers. Obviously within the Aussie model, there's quite a lot of, offshore support, through the Philippines as well, which I'm going to try and count, how many. But they provide us a great level of assistance. It's a very, very busy office. We obviously got plenty going on, and if anything, we've got too much sometimes, but it's not a bad problem to have. So
the 4 full-timers, are they all brokers?
All brokers qualified. The store manager Tracy, who's sort of I guess my PA as well, she's sort of keeps everything ticking, which I think you might have met actually at the awards. But she does a great job, as and as knowledgeable as any of the brokers in the store. She's very, very helpful to them.
Yeah, and I saw you give a shout out to Tracy in your LinkedIn post following the awards as well, because I kind of always feel slightly guilty about Editor's Choice Award because no one knows it's coming. I just pick a finalist of all the finalists and pick one to go, you know what, you've done a great job. And I think it's always so lovely, but to be able to do that, but I do feel bad about it because then you kind of have to come up on stage. I think you said in your post that you were like kind of relaxing because you were like, those are all our categories done, and then your name gets called out.
Yeah, no, I'd rolled up my sleeves and untucked my shirt, and I was off duty for the night at that point. But anyway, you did catch me out, so fair play. But no, look, I think it's great to be recognised, but everyone in that store knows that they play a big part in that. So and particularly Tracy, sort of behind the scenes, with all the structuring and sort of the credit analyst work that she would do, which frees me up to do a lot of the relationship stuff and the general day-to-day sort of customer facing stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to walk through your process and how you actually do what you do just after this advert break. We'll be back with you in a second. So Kit, you mentioned there about having, kind of doing a lot of the kind of client facing stuff, getting into the nitty gritty, doing all the analysis. What exactly, let me say I'm walking around Forest Lake Shopping Centre and I'm a bit like, I need to refinance my loan. I walk into your store. What happens next?
Look, I think I'm probably pretty old school with that. I think it's more of a initial conversation and that fact-finding, situation, get you activated onto the system, just walking you through what the process is going to look like, just trying to, figure out what your objectives are and what you're trying to do. And, from there to sort of start talking about collection of information. From time to time, it might be a very, very straightforward deal, and we could put that together then and there. But I guess I'm probably seeing a lot more over the last, probably 6 to 12 months as well of just really multiple scenarios, like as in, I'm going to refinance and purchase this, or I'm going to turn this property into an investment and go and buy another owner occupied. So there's a lot more scenarios than, that you generally would be able to cover in that sort of quick initial appointment. So I think quite often we would, do a lot of that analytical work behind the scenes and then, come back with the options, which also gives the customer a lot of time to have a, good think about what they want to do. So they're not sort of rushed into any decisions as well.
How do you determine which broker gets the clients that walk in? Is it just like first one, first come, first serve?
Look, I mean, look, the guys in the office get on great, so it's really down to workload, to be honest. And and I think even with that number of brokers, not everyone's in the office at all times. People would duck out for lunch, or and you can imagine how many meetings we have. Sometimes. So it could be sometimes that there isn't a broker available. And then in which case, maybe someone might just take some information, or it's a callback situation. But yeah, it really is just an ad hoc. We have had times where we have tried to implement some sort of rostering system, but I think when it happens as frequently as it does, there's plenty incoming for people. So I think it's probably not as big an issue as it would be in some stores maybe that didn't have that sort of volume of work coming in, I guess.
So looking at your loans personally, Kit, how many loans do you reckon you write in a year?
Look, I'd estimate around 230, I would have thought.
And I mean, obviously, there's a big difference at the moment, I think, with broking than there were even 10 years ago. Because nowadays, I think so many people are writing loans. Not all of them obviously settle. Plus, you might be having to write repeat loans for clients that are kind of not finding the properties they want to buy within their pre-approval settlement process.
For sure, yeah. And I think it's been one of the pitfalls of the market that we've had for the last couple of years. Is I think, at any one time, I've had 30 to 40, first home buyers or, people with pre-approvals sort of like lined up looking for a property, and, with the lowest stock in the, in history in Queensland, when it comes to sort of, properties to purchase. It's not surprising. Unfortunately, we've, had to write on some occasions 2-3 times. We've had to, extend pre-approvals, for customers, but, we're trying to alleviate that, I guess, to some degree. We're looking actually at, we're offering a sort of a buyer's agent service now, which, is predominantly to sort of help those guys as well.
Yeah. And I think this is something that Aussie's been doing recently is the whole sort of move to the property ecosystem of find by own. They're kind of being buyers agents conveyancing into the sort of Aussie ecosystem. Did you use the sort of buyer's agent before Aussie offered that, or is this someone that you?
Look, I think most brokers would have had quite often the referral partners, and particularly those brokers that do the whole BNI, the referral groups, quite often would have worked with buyer's agents. I think as a broker you would get approached regularly by buyers agents, and look, I still would get 2 or 3 inquiries from a broker, buyers agents a week. Obviously now we've got our own, but I think the more sort of publicly you are out there, I guess the more that they see your name, and then they sort of start the LinkedIn posts just keep coming, and the inquiries, or they just drop in the store and give cards because they're just looking for work. But I think since we've it's probably just over 12 months now since we've had our our sort of Aussie buyers agents. We've got a couple that are employed within the group that just help our customers, and it's proven really, really successful.
Yeah. How do you manage that though? I think because obviously when you do have loads of applications but not a huge, like the same amount settling, it can be quite hard to manage people time, but also salaries, and like seeing the work that you were doing for the kind of the payoff might not really marry up. How do you kind of manage that?
Oh, look, in reality, I guess I have the belief that every one of them is going to settle at some stage. You wouldn't want to waste your time with it, and I think it just is. Some people just need that little bit extra time. Some people need their. It sort of probably sounds a little bit disrespectful, but like their hand holding through the process, and that's. And I guess that's a service that we offer. Like it doesn't matter whether you're going to have signed, and I have had them where I've written a pre-approval, and 2 days later I've submitted pre-approvals, and they've found a property before it's been pre-approved, and others are 3 extensions, and a resubmission later. So every customer is different, and I guess that's the way our model works is that you give the customer what they need and what they want, and if that's what we've got to do to to get them where they need to be, that's what we've got to do.
Yeah. And I think this is why, again, like buyer's agents so useful to helping people find those properties. And particularly up in Queensland, as you mentioned there, like such a growth state the last few years. I feel like everyone moved to either the Sunshine Coast or Gold Coast last year. It's a bit like, what? All my friends left. But lovely place to be at the moment. Yeah. So not a bad place to be a broker. But I think it's unusual for you as well that you kind of came in to be a broker and you became a franchisee, like, quite early doors. Was it a decision that you were just like, I want to have my own business? Is that why you kind of decided to do that rather than kind of just being a broker and being a broker under somebody else?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just that independence. So I think, I always sort of call it the two times that I've retired effectively. Retired from the UK government, and then retired from the Queensland government, and and ended up back in broking. And I think it just was that desire not to be working for someone. I think I'd spent my obviously all those years, within government, you're always reporting to someone. It didn't matter how senior I got, there was always, some bigger fish.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it just was that realization at some point in my life. I was like, you know what, I've just had enough of, reporting to someone. So I need to do this for myself. Here we are.
And you mentioned earlier as well about, the fact that Aussie obviously has a really kind of, standardized model. They've got, the franchise offering. You can also kind of be like a mobile Aussie broker. And they've also got things like the centralized support from overseas with the client solutions and associates, is it called?
Correct, yeah. Well done.
I was like,
research.
it's been a while since I wrote that. So I mean, that's a sort of the back end support that helps you do some of the lead qualifications and the sort of analytics, is it, or sort of scenarios. How often do you reckon you use that sort of centralized support?
Oh, look, to different degrees. I think the associates, look, from store to store would vary greatly. Like, obviously depending on which model you're on. The client solutions guys are, amazing. They're actually, very, very good. Save a huge amount of time for us. Yeah, when I started, that didn't exist with Aussie, and obviously went through that transition. And I think that's it's really sort of ticking some boxes. The associates is, it does well. Funnily enough, my daughter's actually, working as an Aussie associate at the moment. So she's sort of, been dropped in the deep end there. And I think the rest of her team call her a Nepo baby, I think is the, what she tells me. But she's loving it. She books, sometimes 6-7 meetings a day. Just having a great time.
What was she doing before?
School. She's literally come out of school. She's as far as I'm aware anyway, she's the youngest in the associates program ever, I believe. Just felt like a good sort of opportunity for her to probably get some life experience in a very short space of time. And she has some, as you would imagine with that type of environment, get some fairly interesting calls. Just to build that resilience in her, to for her to decide whether she does want to follow her poor old dad into the industry. But
I love that. Is she a teenager still?
Yeah, she's only just 18. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I love that. Yeah. And so you're kind of working as a family and as a team at Aussie Forest Lake. Is there anything that you're kind of seeing at the moment that is, really sort of challenging you as a broker? Like I kind of asked because, we mentioned about rates going up, but I mean more broadly, is there anything structurally or in the industry that you're kind of seeing which is causing a little bit of strife?
Look, if I had to sort of like look back over the last 2 or 3 years and sort of like what have our challenges been, I think retention in the industry is pretty tough. So brokerages that are obviously employing PAYG, which is our model. I think you've got a couple of things working against you. You've obviously got the in a lot of circumstances you're effectively training your competition, and then of course you've also just got that really high attrition rate in the industry. It isn't an easy job, and I think a lot of people sort of come into it initially thinking it is an easy job. And, I don't know what the attrition rate is now. I think when I started, it was 66% or something like that. And, my sense is it's probably, not dissimilar to that now. So that's been one of our sort of big challenges. I think other than that, it's just the workload. Like it's, again, in my previous retirements, I sort of took the plan was to retire and take things easy, but in reality I'm doing as many hours now as as what I've probably always done. But at least I'm doing it for myself now, I suppose, is one positive. But
building a business. So you talked about workload there, and I'm always curious to see how everyone manages the workload, because of course being a franchisee, store owner, you kind of have to manage people as well as all of your clients. You have to look at making sure you're on top of compliance. You have to make sure you're on top of lender updates. There's so much to be doing. How do you manage your workload to run the office? Like what sort of things do you like time block?
Work more hours. I think pretty much. I guess I've always sort of been a bit of a workaholic. So it is just trying to keep on top of that by working more to cover it. I'm pretty lucky, I suppose, in a lot of respects. Like, Aussie does take care of a lot of the compliance side of things, and it's one of the benefits of working on that sort of franchise model is a lot of the stuff that I guess if you're an independent you would have to take care of. It is looked at. I think too, sort of part of a group of as you sort of discussed before. Danny's obviously got an interest in other stores, so we leverage that, I guess, that group mentality across the stores, and we use the sort of, I guess, share resources to some degree. So brokers can work at our different stores. We share things from a marketing perspective, or social media managers, that type of thing. That we'll just leverage that across the group, so it's not just all that cost is lumped on one store. We can get the best of it.
Yeah, I think I've actually talked about that in a podcast with Danny before, so I'll actually link that in the show notes in case anyone wants to listen to that after this.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm always curious to know about is how brokers are using artificial intelligence, if at all. And of course, at the Better Business Summit this year, a lot of our conversation and speakers were talking about how to scale a business, how to use AI. And I know that Aussie has been doing a lot of work in the AI space as well. Are you guys using it much in your store, or are you sort of still learning?
Yeah, look, I think the AI thing is really sort of starting to filter down to us. I don't think there'd be too many brokers now that wouldn't be using it in some context. I sit in the office and I hear the chatter about, just assistance with emails, whether it be Copilot, ChatGPT. I think Aussie is probably leading that space and developing it. And I think that's going to just get, more and more in my world in the next sort of, 12 months. I mean, obviously it's coming like a tsunami at us. So, and I think everyone sort of looks at it, not so much that it's going to, mean less brokers, but, probably just that we can provide a better service. I think is what I quite enjoy about it. Saves me time, in the day-to-day sort of stuff that, it can do very, very quickly. I think the amount of tools that we're seeing pop up in the broker world with, just those questions that you'd have to harass your BDM about, or, trawl through credit policies, all of a sudden is a quick dictated question to ChatGPT, and it's there, or the tool that we, sort of internal tools that we've got as well. It's I think it's positive for the industry.
Which of the internal tools do you reckon you use the most?
Oh, look, I think Aussie's still in that stage of developing them at the moment. So we're look, a lot of the policy stuff, I suppose, is I find very, very handy. When you've got a panel of sort of 30 odd lenders, or whatever we have today, it just means that you can provide those quick answers, rather than having to go searching for them. So that's probably where I use it, the most. And obviously, as brokers who realise the challenges we have aren't about rates and lenders, it's all about policy. And you can do all the work and waste all the time in the world, and then then find out from an assessor with a late evening call that you've admitted a policy somewhere that it means they can't do your deal, or you've wasted your time. So anything that can stop me wasting my time is very valuable.
Yeah. And when it comes to actually writing a loan, like, what is your favorite type of loan to write? Like, is there anything where you're like, I can't wait to get my teeth into this one?
Look, I do get a lot of satisfaction, and I don't know whether it's because my kids are a similar age. A lot of satisfaction out of the first home buyers, a lot of satisfaction out of the guarantor loans. I don't know why, it's just always appealed to me to, as a parent, mums and dads helping their kids, giving them that bit of a leg up. And, they're probably the ones that I enjoy the most, I would say.
And what do you shirk from? What do you dislike the most?
Oh, look, I think anything that, the complicated stuff is, no one looks forward to that. Anyone that tells you they look forward to that is lying to you. But, when you've sat down with a customer who's got 42, trusts and companies, and you're trying to unpick that, and and it literally takes days. Anyone that says they enjoy that is lying to you, as far as I'm concerned.
All right.
Yeah,
and when it comes to things like, the sort of things that you're using day to day, like, is there anything outside of what Aussie provides, like whether that's tools or tech or CRM systems that you use that really helps gain back time in your week?
Oh, look, I don't think there's probably too many brokers in the industry that haven't used Quickly over the last, couple of years. And, from time to time we do. it's always interesting. I find when we sort of, we run little experiments from time to time, and we'll compare some of these tools and give them the same questions just to see which answers we come up with, and quite often you're getting very different answers across the platforms. So I think it's constantly evolving. And Aussie's obviously got their version of that, which we're sort of predominantly using now. But I think Quickly was probably I can remember being a very, very early adopter, not long after I'd started, and where it's come from at that point was blows my mind.
Yeah, they've done a lot of work, those guys. We'll take a quick break here. When we come back, we'd like to talk to you about what's next for Aussie Forest Lake, and for you, what sort of the biggest challenges are that you're seeing in the industry as a whole. Like, what if you were king for the day, what would you like to see fixed, and your advice for new brokers coming into market too. We'll get into that just after this message. So Kit, you mentioned there about, obviously having done kind of quite a bit of work on behind the scenes and like building the brokerage and kind of getting your name out there the last 4 years. When you think about what you've been doing in the space of 4 years, what have been like the biggest highlights for you?
Look, I guess, recently, I've got to say, haven't I, recently winning the Editor's Choice Award. That's clearly the apart from all the others. No, look, I think it's, we've recently been named a signature store within the Lendy Group, which I think is is a pretty good achievement after only
what does that mean for people who aren't in the Aussie group?
Within the Lendy group of franchise, the Aussie franchise stores, we're in the top 5% effectively, and it's not just done on results. It's sort of, there's a matrix of tests that they would use, whether it be engagement and feedback from customers, and not to mention the volume of loans and compliance. I think plays a part in it as well. So it's just sort of, it's a little bit of an all-rounder sort of achievement. So I think that's getting there as fast as we did is probably unusual, and something that we're sort of pretty proud of. I think, I don't know, it's really easy, the instant gratification you get, like once you've got a loan to settle, once you've helped out a family, once and I think that's probably what I see as the biggest success. It's where I keep coming back each day, I think.
Yeah. And when it comes to then the biggest bugbears, not necessarily of writing loans, but of actually the industry, like if you could make one change to make broking better, what would you change?
Oh, look, I reckon if you ask that question to 100 brokers, I reckon 99 of them would talk about clawbacks. And there's very few that have spent any time in the industry, and I think particularly the more you write, obviously, those that you just can't be helped, whether they've sold for whatever reason, family breakdown, or whatever's happened, and it just I guess it does sort of stick in everyone's throat to some degree. It can't be fair, but I think most would give you that similar sort of concern.
Yeah, they do. I'd say probably about 80% of people I ask that question to on the podcast will say clawbacks. Is there any type of product though that you think the industry is missing? Like, is there any like lending solution you'd like to see developed that would make a great sort of product for your clients?
Look, I think, I mean, the Aussie panel is, as good as it is, I'd like to see some sort of maybe some element of private lending, something that probably ticks the box for those, really obscure deals that, that we haven't got any other home for. That's probably all I would see. I think our panel writes, 90-something% of the loans in the Australian market. Like it's huge and it's a great panel, but, just every now and then you just come across that deal that, there's just nothing you can do with it. And, that's probably something I'd like to see on there.
Can you give me an example of that? Like what, maybe one recently that you couldn't write?
Oh, look, I've got some problematic bridging deals recently. Obviously, those lenders that sort of still do operate in the bridging space have quite sort of restrictive policies on, total LVR and things like that, and if you end up with a scenario of someone that might end up having 2 unconditional contracts, and it's a real no-brainer of a deal, and it's it's only going to be in place for probably 7 or 8 weeks, but because of the allowance for interest over a 12-month period or a 6-month period or whatever it may be, it just doesn't work in a calculator. And it's that I guess being from the UK, the computer says no, sort of situation. Like it really it's a common sense, it's a deal, but it just doesn't fit black and white, square peg round hole sort of situation. So
yeah, Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is obviously you mentioned it right at the beginning that when you were intelligence analyst, some of the things you were looking at was sort of like in the finance space. And I wonder, obviously, the big conversation that we're having at the moment in the mortgage space is looking at AI, documentation fraud, and
Yep.
kind of being like, how do we prepare for this? And how do lenders and brokers alike ensure that the documentation that we're receiving from borrowers is legitimate and that, it's not coming from non-AML CTF sources? Yeah.
Look,
How do you mitigate that?
I guess with my sort of previous careers hat on, I think the only way that you're going to be able to do that is either directly liaison with employers to verify, I guess to some degree, sort of, provide a reference for customers. I guess I've always been a little bit surprised by that in Australia. Like in the UK, you would quite often see that the lenders would do their due diligence to ensure documents were genuine and that employment was genuine. Whereas, obviously here it's just, there's a payslip, and in reality, anyone with a computer could have generated that payslip, which is fraught with danger. To be honest, I'm probably a little bit surprised that we haven't seen more of it. That would be my first reaction to it.
Well, I guess this is all why the big conversation at the moment is being like, well, how do we improve this? And of course, open banking is one of the things that was kind of flagged as being the panacea for fix for this, and has kind of taken a while to actually get off the ground. But there seems to be more conversations now talking about how can we be using open banking data to avoid this use of reliance on pay slips and bank statements. So particularly if we can tap into things like the ATO portal here is amazing. For anyone who hasn't ever seen a portal anywhere else in the UK, I used to have to do mine via paper in the UK. And there's no way it would auto-populate with anything like the thing it does here. So it's amazing. But I'm like, that would be surely a straightforward fix. Let open banking use ATO data and kind of go that way. Do you think that would help improve your kind of peace of mind and, when you're lodging a loan?
Definitely. Yeah. I'd like to be able to see, even if it is just built into their systems where they can share that information like we can with our digital driver's licenses and that type of stuff now. It's so challenging trying to, get people that very rarely use the platform to be able to pull the right documents and the right years and everything. And I think if there was, just something to make that process a little bit easier and able to stand up to, some scrutiny when it comes to avoiding fraud, I think it would be a positive for sure.
Yeah. Do you reckon that would save you time as well? Like if you're not having to chase the bank statements and payslips?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Like I think I don't know how many hours I would spend every month, trying to explain to a customer how to generate an income statement or how to generate a notice of assessment, which we do all the time, so it's second nature. But to someone that's PAYG really just relies on their account to do the tax at HR block in the shopping centre, they have no awareness and quite often just getting people access to it. That's probably the other challenging thing is you think that everyone has access to to MyGov and their ATO portal, but there's so many people still out there that just don't. Which I think that as time goes on, that will obviously increase, but we still see it quite a lot.
We're seeing, I think, increasingly brokers using open banking data through the consumer data rights, the trusted advisor model. Have you used it much? Like, have you seen any benefit from it?
Yeah, look, we do, the whole bankstatements.com thing is, built within the Aussie process. And realistically, it's up to the customer to some degree. And I think the problem we have with it is that people have spent the last 20 years being conditioned not to provide their banking details to anyone. So it is counterintuitive. And that tends to be the biggest challenge I find is that they're very, very hesitant to be able to log into this, third-party platform to provide that information. And not everyone is that. Sometimes they just do it, and it's nice and easy, and everything sort of sails through. But usually it's when you're trying to build trust with the customer, and within that conversation, you're like, just need to log in with your banking details into this app I'm going to send you. It's it doesn't send a great message when you're in that early stage of that relationship. I think it's probably one of the issues that I sort of see with it.
Yeah, well, hopefully the government can try and fix that. Maybe do like Face ID or something. So it's just go in there and log in, and then you're done. Yeah. When it comes to then the future for what you're sort of doing and building, like what do you have you got any ambitions or plans for this year, for 2026, or for the near future?
Look, I think to be honest, I wish I had the time to sit down and strategize to that level. But in reality, we're so busy that it's more just sort of trying to keep our head above water at the moment. But look, I guess we're always sort of trying to attract good talent and keep good talent. And my aim, I guess, with the store is to to have a really good sort of foundation of brokers that have been there a long time, that are really not reliant on the store for work. They've sort of established their foundation, as I said, and they're now working off their referrals. But it's just sort of trying to get people to that sort of 2 or 3 year period when that's actually when that really kicks in for them. And I guess I sort of can see that in my not so distant past. That sort of light bulb moment one day when it's all of a sudden, hang on, my phone's ringing really regularly here with these referrals, but you don't get that for the first couple of years. The first couple of years are very tough.
And when you think about then, I mean, it sounds like you're pretty busy doing the broking day in, day out, but when you think about how you can kind of try and unwind and de-stress, and this is something that we talk about a lot with brokers, because obviously being a sole trader, you're everything to everyone and you do work long hours. Is there anything that you do when you've had a particularly hard day to try and come back down and shake off that energy?
I mean, I live on acreage. My youngest daughter's a bit of an animal fanatic, so we have got sort of what she calls the farm at home. So I'd probably get sort of put to work on the farm, quite regularly, which is a bit of an opportunity to disconnect, I guess. But
what kind of animals have you got?
Oh, we've got goats and pony and chooks and ducks and geese and guinea pigs and dogs. It's a menagerie. Which obviously takes a lot to look after. So I think I just sort of just trying to think about what I actually do to unwind. Well, that's probably the only thing I could really sort of think of that. Other than that, I'm usually sat in front of the computer or in the shop for 13 hours. But
just feeding animals and cleaning poop.
Yeah, pretty much. That's it. Yeah.
What do you think then about, like, if you could go back again 4 years ago and like redo your start into broking, is there anything you would have done differently?
Look, I don't think I would change the industry. I think the way that we've done it, Danny and I, it's all been about growth. And which I guess when I've sort of tried to retire those previous couple of times wasn't really on my horizon, but I've just sort of like got involved and gone with it. And look, ultimately that's working out really well. But I think it's you have to have a good side to hard think when you're going to get into the industry, is like what do you actually want out of this? If you want an easy lifestyle and write your 3 or 4 loans a month, then opening a store is probably not for you. That would be my advice. But no, I wouldn't change it now.
Yeah. And of course, you've got your daughter now working alongside you. Is that your succession plan? Are you kind of been like training her up to take over?
It depends who you ask. If you ask her, I think that's the succession plan, but we'll see. It's at the moment, she does a couple of days in the store, and obviously works because she works directly for Lendy as one of the associates, but just you're sort of placed in the store to, I guess, be around the brokers, be around the office, and learn what you can from it. And yeah, I think. She's been doing it now for probably about 3 months, and seems to be really enjoying it. So I think it's probably pretty good signs. But just time will tell.
Wait and see.
I think it's always it's a challenging industry. I think for probably not just young girls, but young people in general. I think when you're trying to provide advice to a 30, 40-year-old and you're fresh out of school and just turned 18 is always going to be a bit challenging. But I think a bit of the plan that we've sort of developed for her, I guess, is to give her that real sort of shock of a lot of life experience very, very quickly, doing the 100-odd phone calls a day to establish that sort of rapport and build that so that when she actually does get in front of a customer, it's sort of second nature and it's nothing she hasn't been able to see before.
Yeah. And if you could give any advice to a new broker, so let's say you had someone joining you for the first time who's just starting out in their journey, what advice would you give them to succeed in broking?
Look, I think you have to be prepared to work very, very hard for at least a couple of years. And you might be able to slowly take your foot off the accelerator then. But I think that's probably the the biggest problem that a lot of brokers when they come into the industry is they're probably not quite prepared for, just how hard it is in that couple of years. And then I think a lot of them get to the point it's like, actually, this is too hard, and they jump ship before it starts to get easier again. And I think, probably they also sort of need to be prepared to work hours that aren't going to necessarily be your 9 to 5. You show me a successful broker, successful owner of a brokerage that works 9 to 5. It just doesn't happen. And I think when you get sort of particularly younger people sort of come in and they think it's like a finance world job, works for a bank, 9 to 5, clock in, clock out. This is not that. And and I think if you come in without those expectations, I think you'll do pretty well. And I think that would probably be, the main advice. I think, probably don't waste your time sort of, working with or, with people that don't sort of share those values with you. That would be the other major thing.
Well, Kit, if you could think about maybe the longer term plan. So you mentioned about, being kind of stuck in the doing of broking at the moment. But if you could fast forward to 2036, which sounds like super futuristic to me, but it's only 10 years away. What do you kind of expect the market to look like then? What do you think broker market share will be doing?
Look, I suppose I'd probably be lying if I said I wasn't concerned by I guess the big push from the proprietary channel, particularly with the adoption of AI and the digital, offerings that some of our lenders do. So yeah, look, I'm not convinced that we will still have as big a market share as what we have got, in the future, which I think is probably a mistake. But I wouldn't be too surprised if it doesn't, that pendulum doesn't start swinging back the other way a little bit.
Well, make hay while the sun shines, I suppose.
Exactly. I'll be retired again by then, hopefully.
Right, I see. Well, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that doesn't come into fruition. Look over at the UK, still super high broker market shares. Let's hope that it stays that way. Kit, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story here on the Elite Broker Podcast. And congratulations once again on winning the Editor's Choice Award and for the outstanding client reviews and testimonials, both from your clients and from your colleagues alike. Well deserved.
Thank you for having me, and thank you again for the award.
If you've got any questions for me or for Kit Johnson at Aussie Forest Lake, then do feel free to reach out. You can reach me at editor@theadvisor.com.au. Of course, I'm sure Kit will be happy to answer your questions if you've got any. He said more than happy. There you go. And do take a listen back to previous episodes of the Elite Broker Podcast, all on the Advisor Podcast Network. As I mentioned, the one with Danny Blair that we recorded a few years back now will be in the show notes below. If you want to find out more about how they're working together and building powerhouse franchises, then do check that out. And if you're a new broker listening to this, then do make sure you come along to our new Broker Academy, which is coming along the Eastern Seaboard in June. And we'll be talking about all the things you need to know to get hitting the ground running as a new broker. You can check that all out on newbrokeracademy.com.au. We hope you have a fab week, and we'll catch you next time for another episode on the Advisor Podcast Network.